Thank you very much. We, and I speak for Christopher Wales and myself, we are honored to be in Seville. We are grateful to the authorities at the school who had the courage to resist the efforts by various members of the government here to shut down this event. I think it is emblematic of the distaste this government has for rule of law that they would violate the Constitution of Spain, specifically Section 30.1c, and interfere with lectures and teaching in the university. But this is not a government who returns to the rule of law. Let's be very clear. And in fact, the tax system in Spain represents the worst elements of civic oppression that both Dr. Wales and I have ever seen. Please do not compare Spain, as Chris so eloquently put yesterday. Please don't try to compare Spain to any country, because there is no country with the confluence of so many factors that make the tax system unfit for purpose. We can start with the fact that you folks haven't had a budget in 3 years, a complete violation of not only your Constitution, but the very idea that a taxpayer will have some accountability for where his money goes. None of you know, because your budget's out of date. You don't know where your hard-earned money is being allocated. And the government doesn't care, because this government is an insult to democracy. This government that goes around the world talking about international law is violating domestic law, European law, and international law every day. And I'm not just talking about Pedro Sanchez, a man who any country on earth would have resigned months ago when almost his entire family was indicted for various aspects of corruption. He is a mockery of democratic responsibility. Let alone all those members of his cabinet that are indicted, or the judges, or the prosecutors. Please don't compare Spain to a banana republic, because Spain doesn't deserve the comparison. You're shaming all those banana republics that have tried to reform. And I'm not coming here as some American trying to lecture you about democracy. You may not understand this or believe it, but in his own way, President Trump represents a threat to democracy, because he's starting to behave like Pedro Sanchez. And the more Trump behaves like Sanchez, the more trouble the United States is in. President Trump stamps out executive orders every day that affect world trade. Pedro Sanchez, he strikes out executive decrees every day because he gets around a parliament that he cannot control. And so many of the key decisions involving your own daily lives with Hacienda are not law at all. Let's talk about Decree 1065, 2007, allowing the Hacienda to seize bank records, to seize bank accounts, to reverse the presumption of innocence. That is not law. That is an executive decree a la Trump. Sanchez and the prior government do this. They do it without Trump's orange hair or flair, but they do it consistently and have been doing it for years. I have broken down this discussion of Hacienda in various categories. Firstly, the governance deficit, the fact that this government and other governments have been ruling by decree and essentially work around legislation, making a super executive that absorbs the powers of the legislature, that in part absorbs the powers of the judiciary through their appointments to central judicial bodies. Then we can talk about the incoherent legal architecture. And then the perverse incentives that are contained within the system that leads to the fact that businesses coming to Spain enter Spain with no legal certainty. So the governance deficit, as I've said, relates to this rule by decree, which runs contrary to the European Convention, the European Charter of Freedoms, and any basis of democracy. If your legislature is not providing the legislation it is enshrined and able to provide, you are not being run in a rule of law state. So I know the Spanish people are proud of their democracy. And what I am asking the Spanish people to do is take a hard look at how far you are from democracy today. And in my humble opinion, the tax agency is the thin edge of the wedge. Chris and I are working hard on this point because we see the tax agency as your future. If you can't control this agency, you will not have your freedom to operate. And I want to quote from a Spanish leader, Ignacio Ruiz Orabo, who at one point actually led the tax agency. And he was asked to comment on what Chris and I have been doing. Because it's hard when you're a foreigner to come in and make comments on another country's activities. So we were gratified by this quote. From the outset, as can be deduced from the positions I have long held, I basically agree with what the international law firm has denounced. Yes, I also believe that in Spain, the legal regulation of the legal tax relationship is extremely asymmetrical. Since in tax matters, the state is everything and the individual, the taxpayer, is nothing. I also believe that for years, the tax agency has ruthlessly abused this unlimited privileged legal position. And I also believe that the way in which the variable remuneration of tax inspectors is set constitutes an unacceptable anachronism that objectively, I emphasize this term, leads to malfeasance by the officials involved. That's the former head of the tax agency. So when we talk about Hacienda, the beating heart of Hacienda is corruption. Make no mistake, there is nothing in law or in practice that in any rule of law country would allow the bonus system that exists in Spain to continue. However consistent it may be with Pedro Sanchez's morality, it is inconsistent with everyone else. Why? Because your tax inspectors are paid basically on a percentage of what they can grab. It doesn't have to be correct. If it isn't correct, they are not punished. They have impunity, complete impunity. And what does complete impunity do? In the audience today is Michelle Span. Moving here from Holland as a retiree, she came for a better life with her beloved husband. Relentlessly pursued for 7 years by the Hacienda. Pursued to the point of complete emotional stress and breakdown. Her husband suffered 2 near-death heart attacks that have left him unrecognizable. All at the hands of a tax law that was misapplied, where after 7 years she was absolved of any liability. But as she said to me yesterday, that doesn't bring back her husband. And she is one of the hundreds that have contacted us because not only of the abuse of Hacienda, not only because of their immorality, not only because of their corruption, but because of their inhumanity. So this is not a case or a situation that is technical or legal or dealing with some regulation. These are the human victims of Hacienda, and there are tens of thousands of them in Spain. And this corrupt scheme has been denounced from within Hacienda. Tax inspectors, the technical side of the tax inspectors, have denounced the bonus system themselves, going on record to say that the bonus system itself is corrupt and violates the very tenets of fair taxation. When you get to look at the structure of the tax agency in its interaction with citizens, a number of things hit you from the start. Number one, when they give you this wrongful assessment, trying to determine how much they can steal from you, because that's their only goal, they need to steal enough money to make their quota for the bonus. So when they determine how much they can steal, then you have to pay. It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. You have to make the payment. And then, after you make the payment, you go before a legal administrative tribunal that under the Santander case heard at the EU, the European Union has said, that's not a court. So after they take all your money, you're in front of a tribunal that Luxembourg says isn't really a court at all, and it holds you up for 3 or 4 years before you get to an actual court, where you stand an excellent chance of recovering your money. But wait, what have you sustained beyond, in some cases, the heart attacks? You had your reputation put in the gutter because the Hacienda called everybody to find out where they can get your assets. Or you've been published in the newspaper like something out of 1930 Italy. Your name is there for all your friends and family to see. Or you've lost your business because when they demanded these payments, you were unable to pay your employees. And the one thing I can tell you Hacienda doesn't care about is your survival or the survival of your business. There should be a wanted poster in business organizations. And that wanted poster should be Hacienda, wanted for criminal activities, for the destruction of the Spanish business community. Spain is a country out of Orwell. They set up legislation to enhance startups, and then Hacienda goes and audits all the startups and closes them. It's a complete farce. I can't tell you how many companies have come to us, young Spanish entrepreneurs, losing their R&D credits because they didn't technically check the right form or get the right stamp. Imagine 30 young technologists out of work because their company didn't get the right stamp. What kind of country is this? Where is your spirit of entrepreneurship if you're allowing these masked marauders of corruption to attack your youngest and your brightest? And why is it a crime for me to be at this university and talk about these crimes going on by your government? Why is this something to be feared in a country that hails itself as a democracy? That we're up here pointing out the complete licentiousness of a system unbounded by law, unbounded by morality, limited only by the political ambitions of corrupt politicians, who can't see the difference between their own wallet and that of the state. They just don't want the truth to get out, because what a Spanish politician needs, whether it's PP or it's PSOE, what they need is impunity. What they need is the reason there are so few people here. They need you to stop caring. They need you to put your head in the sand and pay whatever the man demands, or woman. And then, after you've given your money and you've gone to the administrative tribunal and you've waited 5 years and you've finally gotten to court, if you've organized yourself really well, I mean your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, you've done the Olympian marathon of hope, and you've made it, what does the Hacienda do? They charge you with simulación, fraud, because no Spaniard can keep such good records. We are dealing with cases today of perfectly honest businessmen whose charge is they're too honest. Hacienda doesn't believe their honesty. And so, in the most vile manner possible, they accuse people of simulación. It is Orwellian and shameful. But the shame continues, because if you have the cojones to fight them, then they're going to charge you with a criminal act. They're going to say that you are a criminal and you're engaged in tax evasion. Just because you don't want to be a schmuck and pay them everything you've got on a tax you don't owe, they're going to criminalize it. So you can't have a bank account, you can't travel. You become an international criminal or a pariah based on some nameless inspector who doesn't know their rear end from page one, but who knows when his bonus is due and wants to make damn sure he gets his bonus on time, which doesn't matter whether he's right or wrong. It's a great gig. Every lawyer would love that. To go to court, what doesn't matter whether you win or lose, you get paid absolutely the same. So these I should stick closer to the microphone so the translator can understand what I'm saying. And I think that's probably fair, given what I'm saying. The lack of accountability of the tax authorities is not only about the bonus. It's about their constant misinterpretation of the law. In Spain, the law is what they want to pretend it to be. It is drafted in a very ambiguous way. If you read the Beckham law, for instance, which is something like 363 very ambiguous words, you understand how easy it is for Hacienda to go after the foreigners or those Spaniards who would join the system, to go after them for whatever interpretation they want, knowing the tremendous difficulties of ever bringing the case to court. So, why do I firstly talk about extortion? And I want to talk about extortion for a minute, because once again, Spain stands alone. And my friend Chris might correct me, but I think it stands alone in this. Because when you talk about extortion, you have to look at what the law, you'll excuse me, not the law, what the decree sets out for what the government will pay you not to bring their misdeeds to the attention of a court. So, if you negotiate, quote, a clean deal with a negotiated tax base, no formal assessment, and no chance to appeal, you can discount 65% of the penalty. This means that in some cases, only 35% of the penalty that you as a taxpayer believe is wrongful needs to be paid. If, however, you want a formal assessment, the taxpayer can have a double discount. In other words, if you're going to completely forego your rights, you get a double hit. 30% for signing an agreement and 40% for making payment. Almost 70% just to not challenge the illegal assessment you've received. Then for the same deal, but with the right to appeal, the discount goes down to just 30%. And if you want the right to appeal against the whole thing, it's back to the original offer of tax, interest, and quite possibly 125% penalty. So God bless those who have the courage to go to court. And when you go to court, under the rule of law, you should have what is known as equality of arms. You should meet the government in court on an equal footing. It should not be an oppressive situation. It should be a situation where both parties have disclosure and both parties are meeting with equal powers. That would hardly be the case in Spain, in today's situation where the victim is under the threat of massive, massive penalties. And where, and this is shocking to anyone who understands that the presumption of innocence is central to the rule of law. In Spain, it's the opposite. The inspector who is corruptly taking your money because they've got a bonus, to protect them, there is a presumption of veracity. So we're going to believe the guy who's getting a corrupt bonus over the individual. Now tell me how that makes any sense at all. And tell me how that empowers the most corrupt behavior. If you can walk into court as a cop, having beaten the hell out of the guy, and you wait long enough till the bruises are healed, and then it's up to him to prove that you beat him. That's what you're dealing with in Spain. And I'm not even getting into the fact that in Spain, taxes are a game of selective enforcement. We are going to enforce taxes against our political enemies. What a shameful case is the Ayuso case, where it appears, it is alleged, that the partner of Ayuso had his tax confidentiality violated by the individuals charged with its protection. Then you have the 720 case, the Form 720 case, where Spain was spanked by the EU for the most draconian legislation imaginable if a foreigner didn't file his Form 720. A massive penalty, complete retroactivity, as if the Spanish government had never seen something called the rule of law. And what is of seminal interest to lawyers and to victims is the concept of proportionality, the most fundamental concept in human rights, that the government action must be proportional to the risk it engages. That is a concept unknown to the Spanish tax collection agency. And it's reflected in the presumption of veracity. It's reflected in the near administrative bulla, the administrative impunity of those people within the tax administration. And these aberrant cases like 720, they are not alone. There was a recent case where a famous actress fought the agency for 10 years, taking 10 years out of her life. And her advisor decided to give in. The woman who fought the agency was found innocent. And the advisor, who's nearly my age, was given 80 years. 80 years. You would not give a mass murderer in this country 80 years. But you give a tax advisor 80 years because you know that the only thing you've got when you have no rule of law, when you have no fairness, when you have no equity, the only thing you're left with here in Spain is fear. And Hacienda is great at manifesting fear. They did it at the university. We've seen it yesterday and the day before. And they do it with all of us. We fear a mass organization that's nearly a cult that is operated on corrupt principles with little or no accountability. We stand in fear of them because of what they can do to all of us. And when you are asked, well, what can be done? How do you fix this system? It is not complicated. It is actually quite simple. You apply the rule of law to the system. Immediately, you void every finding based on the illegal bonuses. And you pay the inspectors what they're worth, but you give up the bonuses immediately. Because there is no place in a democratic society for those bonuses. Then you discharge the presumption of veracity, and you set up a system of equality of arms. Then you impose strict time limits on Hacienda in terms of all of their activities, and you get rid of the administrative courts that aren't courts, so that the longest you're held up is measured in months and not in years. You get rid of selective enforcement. You apply oversight. You get rid of fear. And the first way you get rid of fear is you sanction the lawyers who are complicit with the system and are afraid to take it on. I've worked all over the world. I have never seen my colleagues so frightened of any organization in my life. I can't tell you how many colleagues I've gone to for help in Spain who tell me, we cannot help you, because if we do, our families, our clients, our friends will all be audited. This pathology has to stop. And I would say that the advisor's fear is a terrible lesson for the rest of the country. If your lawyers are unable to stand up to power. If your lawyers are unable to speak truth to power, then that says a tremendous amount about the democracy in which you are in. And what is terrible about Hacienda is that they try to present the Spanish populace as full of fraud. And PSOE tries to present this as, we're going after the big guy. But in fact, they don't. They go after the poor far harder than they go after the rich. GESTA, which is the Union of Spain's Tax Technicians, has repeatedly documented that small and medium-sized enterprises and ordinary individuals bear the brunt of inspections, while large fortunes and multinationals often escape scrutiny. Hacienda directs 80% of its inspection resources towards small businesses and individuals, leaving the big fish largely untouched, a structural bias that distorts enforcement. So it's very clear that in addition to the fact that they're going after the smallest businesses, they're also discriminating against foreigners. And that's what brought us to the case. What brought us to the case was the Beckham law. We expanded our mandate ourselves, sua sponte, because we were so disgusted by this agency. But we first came here because of the systemic discrimination against foreigners. And we were not alone. In March 2025, the European Commission referred Spain to the Court of Justice of the EU for discriminatory tax treatment of non-resident taxpayers. And more is to come. An individual within the Hacienda criticized the Hacienda. And the comment was, in Spain, the right to freedom of expression is consistently undermined. Tax audits are deployed against journalists, Javier Chicote, under Montero, and Alfonso Lucia, under Montoro, amongst many others, and media outlets shortly after they published reports on corruption or government misconduct. This pattern of intimidation affects academics, whistleblowers, and public figures who criticize government police, or lawyers who bring cases against Hacienda. It is, without a doubt, a residue of this system that, as a gentleman I spoke to earlier said, it leaves you with the impression that there is nothing you can do. This is cultural. This cannot change. I will just give you two short examples from my life's work. In 2010, I was hired by the Red Shirt movement of Thailand. I went to Bangkok. Dozens of the red shirts were being murdered in the street. I went on the street. We documented the human rights abuses of an army that had consistently murdered civilians for generations. Within 1 year, we had the Prime Minister of Thailand indicted for murder. And we, for the first time, took Thailand to the International Criminal Court. And since that time, there has been no systemic murder of civilians, unlike any period in Thailand's past. Now, I cannot claim credit for that, but I can tell you our team is part of the hundreds of brave Thai lawyers and academics who made that small change possible. It is not only in Thailand. Last year, on behalf of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, we took Apple to a criminal forum for their export of minerals, illegal export of minerals, out of Congo through the DRC, through Rwanda. Now, amazingly, Apple issued a statement to say they had stopped all of those shipments. Now again, we can't claim victory. Apple still is in front of a court and is entitled to the presumption of innocence. But you can, every one of us has the power to change history. We do not have to sit in fear every day, because to sit in fear every day defeats the hope that is democracy. And that's why I say to you, do not mourn all of these empty seats, Professor. What you have done is a courageous act on the road to Spain's renewal of its democracy, which is long overdue. I thank you for it. Thank you very much.